Have you ever wondered what true greatness really is? If so, well then you've found the right show. On this podcast, you'll hear real people sharing real stories of real change.
Hold on, I have to get my excitement out.
You can get your excitement out.
All right, I'm ready.
You should do that again.
What?
Get your excitement out.
Oh. All right. Welcome to the Searching for Greatness podcast. I am the wife of your host, Regina Louisa Fleer, and I am so glad that y'all are here. Today, we're going to be talking to the one and only Michael Fleer and listening to his story. Michael, how are you doing today?
I am dandy as a lion, and I'm excited to share my story and finally be a guest on my own show.
Ooh, look at that. The tides have turned. Michael, how was your Christmas?
It was wonderful. We had lots of fun, and I got lots of wonderful presents, and Regina got to play an 11-year-old girl in the Christmas Eve program, and it was fun watching her do that. I had 2 lines, and I got to dress like a homeless hobo. So, not trying to disregard homeless people, but I had fun getting to wear sweatpants and a flannel and opposite colored gloves to the Christmas Eve service.
You were in some comfy outfits, but you know, the play went well and it was good.
It was fun, and we have a beautiful Christmas tree, and our house is lit up very brightly from all of the Christmas lights, and it's just been a wonderful time of the year.
Yeah, it really was a slow down Christmas, in my opinion, just with the extreme cold temperatures that kind of flooded through basically across the United States. So, well, I'm glad your Christmas went well. Everybody fasten your seatbelts for Michael's story. So, Michael, have you found true greatness?
Well, I would certainly hope so, but just to play the part of the guest, I will say, yes, I have.
Awesome. Could you tell us about how you found true greatness? Let's start maybe at the beginning of your true greatness story.
So in the beginning, my dad and my sister were riding in the combine, and then they got a call from my mother that she was going into labor. And then they thought I was going to be born in the car, but after about 15 minutes at the hospital, I was born. And then, is that where you wanted me to start when you said the beginning, or just?
I mean, you can start there. It definitely gets us insight to.
All right.
Your personality.
I like to tell stories very fast.
You like to tell stories very slow and very detailed.
So I should give the Spark Notes version or the sweetened condensed version?
No, tell your story in your words and how it works for you.
I'll give the sweetened condensed version and start a little past my actual childbirth, even though that is enthralling and exciting. And the Huskers were actually good the day I was born. They beat someone 57-0. Anyway, besides that, I'll fast forward to the fun parts of my life and try to keep it entertaining for the audience. But I grew up in Nebraska on a farm to my mother and my father, and my grandparents all lived pretty close. My grandparents on my dad's side lived just a mile away, and my grandpa on my mom's side was about an hour away. And my grandma on that side passed away before I was born, but I was really blessed to have a good family in my life and family that loved me and went to church for as long as I can remember. And yeah, pretty normal life, I would say, for a Nebraska kid growing up in the country. I did survive a fatal haystack attack when my sister left me to die stuck in between 2 haystacks. But other than that situation, not too much strange things. I would say I was always a shy kid growing up. I wasn't very outgoing. was kind of awkward and quirky. I was always taller than everyone else. But besides that, at the age of 6 is when I found true greatness. And it was in our vacation Bible school, and my great uncle, who was the founding pastor of our church, led a guess what time, which was when he would tell a story that would kind of resonate with the kids. And he was talking, I don't remember everything because I was only 6 years old, but he was talking about heaven and hell. And he talked about how you could go to either one of those places. And I just remember sitting there and I realized that the things that I had already done in my life would qualify me for hell. And it's kind of hard looking back to think about that, but I did have a sense of who I was already at that age and knew that I had a problem. And lucky for me, I had people who told me the way to deal with that problem. And it's nothing I could do on my own, but what someone had done for me. And that was Jesus' sacrifice on the cross and his great love for me to be my savior. So I went into what is now an office, but at that time it was the old nursery of the church with my great uncle, Pastor Hoysinger. And he showed me the gospel, and I asked Jesus to come into my heart and be my savior that day. And that is the day I found true greatness. And it's not that great of a story, in my opinion. It's just very simple because at the age of 6, I hadn't done that many bad things in the eyes of the world. But I remember there was a birthday party I was at maybe 6 years ago or so, maybe less than that, somewhere around that time frame. And someone came up to me and just asked, "How'd you get saved?" And I had no clue who he was, so I told him my story, and then he told me his story. And his story included really rough home life, really rough relationship with some people in his family, drugs, alcohol, just really tough life situation compared to what I grew up with and what I had dealt with. And he talked about reading through the book of Matthew and how the Bible really just spoke to him and God spoke to him through that. And he ended up getting saved and giving his life to Jesus. And I made the remark to him, "Wow, your story is incredible. You need to share that with people. That's how people get saved." And he told me, "Your story is important too. You need to share that with people." And that's really part of the reason that inspired me to start this podcast. And looking back, I might not think my story is that great, but it is important for people to share their stories. And the great thing about your story, whether you think it's great or not, is it does have that source of greatness. It has what God has done for you, what Jesus did on the cross for you to save you. And when I think about that now, it might not feel like my story can really help anyone, but I'm called to share it. And there's great power in all of our stories of us who have found true greatness.
Wow. Yeah, I completely agree that some stories definitely aren't, as cool as some others would be, but they are nonetheless just as important as anybody else's to share with people, even though you could be shy. And our pastor at our church always tells us that if you cannot give your salvation testimony to someone, to share it to someone, then what's up? Like, you need to be working on that, about sharing your testimony with others, because that can really resonate with someone else. So, Michael, you talked about how you were young and how you got saved, but what was it like from that moment you got saved until going through high school and different stuff like that? What was it like for you as a young Christian man going to a public school? You went to a public school. What was that like, being a Christian in a public school for you?
Well, I would say in elementary school, I didn't really feel that different from most of my classmates, other than the fact, like I said, I was really shy and kind of awkward. And that always made me a little different. I mean, we were even talking about that with things over Christmas break for some people, just the way that I kind of acted and just to the way I am now. But other than that, I would say I was pretty similar to my classmates. I remember we would talk about going to church. We would talk about how Sunday was kind of a different day, and we didn't really have anyone who swore very much, didn't do drugs and alcohol at that time. We weren't watching bad movies, in my opinion. And it was just like we kind of all lived the same way. And then when we got into junior high, and then really my freshman year is kind of when, at least for me, that's the age where you start realizing that you're changing as a person and need to start deciding what path you're really going to go on. And I say that with knowing I gave my life to Jesus. I was saved, but at that point I was kind of just going through the motions of doing things because I knew they were right and not really motivated by my love for God and my relationship with Him. It was just kind of, okay, I know I'm a Christian. This is what I say. This is how I live my life, and didn't really give much thought to who I was as a person. And I remember my freshman year, like I said, in those junior high years, you start acting different ways. Kids start doing different things for fun. There's more peer pressure to talk certain ways, watch certain things. And I remember my friends would be giving me a hard time about stuff. And I remember some remarks I just started making like to myself, like, well, why do I do this? Why don't I say those words? Why don't I watch those movies? And I thought, like, okay, I'm already going to heaven. I know that the Bible says that it's not about anything I do. So I'm already on my way there. Why do I really need to worry about kind of the way I live my life now? And especially my freshman year, I don't remember exactly the time frame. I'd like to say it was the fall of my freshman year, but I remember my friends made a comment to me once that, oh, you don't say this. Why don't you say that? And it's like, well, I could say that, and maybe I'll even start doing it. And I just remember some of the things I would talk about with them at lunch and thinking, like, why am I talking about this stuff? Like, I never used to do that before, and it was just peer pressure. I mean, just talking about filthy things about other people, kind of bullying other people, just demeaning. And that really wasn't who I had been as a person, but I was just going with the flow of that, putting other people down, and I didn't really grow up watching a whole lot of movies, but I knew there was some movies that I didn't want to watch that contained just things that I don't think a follower of Jesus should be comfortable putting into their mind. I mean, there's some pretty bad movies out there in the world today, and they were talking about one of them at lunch, and they were like, oh, it's not something you would watch, Michael. You wouldn't like it. And I was like, oh, just send me the link anyway. And I just was making these choices of kind of wishy-washy, going with the flow. The Bible talks about the path that leads to destruction of being wide. And that's really where I kind of saw my life going towards, was that wide path, just kind of wanting to fit in with other people more than really examine myself and the way I was living. And it was that point where it wasn't anyone who came up to me and said I needed to think about these things. It was more just God working in my heart, like, okay, what are you going to do with your life? And it's around that time, around when I was 15, 16, I don't remember the exact age. I just know it was, I guess I could do the math, but somewhere around there, my freshman year in high school, I decided, okay, I'm going to make God a priority in my life. I am going to want to serve Him. I'm going to want to live for him. I'm going to want to give my life into his hands. And I could just tell a change in my personality, change in the way I lived, a change in my joy from that moment on. Even though I had found that true greatness way earlier on in life, I don't think I had fully realized what treasure I had. I hadn't fully taken advantage of the awesome gifts that come along with that. And that's not to say I was perfect. When I look back at my life, I mean, I still messed up a lot, just like how any high schooler does, still have lots of regrets of either things I wish I would have done differently, things that I wish I would have stood up for more. But I could definitely tell my life was different during that time, and I had a purpose, and I had something I was working towards. And like I said about not fully taking advantage of the gift of greatness, I think a lot of Christians can be in that boat where you know Jesus, you know what he's done for you, but you don't fully realize all the great blessings that God has given to you, and really the power that comes just from having a relationship with the one who's in control of everything, the one who sustains everything, and really knowing that you have the Spirit of God living inside of you. And since that moment of kind of deciding that, okay, this is who I'm going to be, I'm not going to worry about what other people think of me, not going to worry about what's socially acceptable. I'm going to worry about what God's plan is for my life and who he wants me to be, how he wants me to live. And even if I fall short of that, I'm not going to dwell in that rut. I'm going to try to pick myself back up and keep living for the Lord.
Wow. So you hit a point where you're like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm stagnant. I'm just doing the same old thing. I'm not growing. I'm not doing anything. What did you do at that time? I know you said you decided just to, follow Christ and different stuff like that, but what was it like for you, like with your devotions, with your prayer life? What was it like for you as a teen in high school trying to do it on your own, like learning how to do devotions and prayer and stuff like that?
So one thing with devotions that I was really blessed with, I had my mom from basically the moment I got saved. I remember she would make a point that I was going to do devotions before I even really knew the importance of that. She had, I forget what they were, but they were devotional books made for little boys, and they had a Bible verse and that you read, kind of like the theme verse, and then a short little story, like a fictional story that you could relate to as a young kid. Maybe it might be about anger or forgiveness, or even just knowing if you're going to heaven or not. And then there'd be a Bible passage. And my mom, when I was young, she'd do that with me every night when I went to bed. And then as I got older, I had that instilled in me. And you're not always perfect consistency when you're trying to do daily stuff like that, but I had that ingrained in me. And really, I'd say even up until that point of when I was 15, 16, I was still doing devotions, but just kind of going through the motions, just reading, and sometimes not even really fully comprehending or grasping anything from it, not taking anything and applying it to my life. And so I'd say in terms of reading the Bible and wanting to not just read the Bible, but study it and see what the Bible's actually saying to me, and not how can this help my life. Like, I remember I did some devotional books that were for like with a sports theme in it, and that was fun. But sometimes it was just like, oh, how can I find entertainment out of this, rather than how can I let God speak to me through his word. So I noticed in that, and then my prayer life really improved in that time point where I'm talking about now. I would write out prayers to God, and to go to the relationship thing that I talk about a lot on this podcast, it was a relationship. It wasn't like God's far off. Sometimes it felt like God was just right there in the bedroom with me, sitting on the bed, and felt like I could talk about anything. Like wow, I'm really struggling with this, whether it was doubt, fear, things in school, shortcomings of my own. Just this is a huge temptation for me. I don't know how to deal with it. And just felt like I could talk to God about anything, and really just I made prayer lists to help me stay consistent in prayer. And when God would do something great in my life, I'd write it down to kind of make note of it, remember it. And that's the best way I can describe it. My relationship with God just improved. It wasn't like a fake thing that I was just doing. I would say lots of people probably just saw the results of my change and they didn't know the reason for why I was changing as a person. But it really was just my God and I time and my relationship with him. And one thing for me growing up, since I went to church, and our church had a pretty big Christian school. Well, I guess I shouldn't say pretty big. They had a Christian school with a decent amount of kids in it. You went to that school growing up.
Yeah, I did.
And so most of the kids I was in Sunday school with and the people my age who I would see in church, I thought that they were like the perfect Christians because they had verses memorized. They would sing the songs in the church services. When we had Bible school, they were the ones getting to teach the schools and lead the lessons and things. And I just grew up thinking that they had their whole lives put together and that they didn't struggle with sin, that they didn't ever miss a devotion time or reading their Bible, that they were praying all throughout the day. And I just kind of had that in my mind. And as I got older, I started realizing that maybe that wasn't the case with everyone. And I would say the way it helped me was knowing that it's not a church, it's not a school, it's not even a family situation that you can bank on and rely on to have a close relationship with God. Something that you can make for yourself. I mean, if you have the Bible and you have prayer, which for anyone, prayer is available for anyone. A Bible, hopefully, if you're a Christian, you have a Bible of some sort. If you have those two things, you can find a way to have a close relationship with God. It doesn't matter your situation. Like I said, with my mom teaching me devotions, a good school, a good family situation, good church, that can definitely help you. It can lay a good foundation, but that's not the source of your greatness. It's not the source of your relationship. So I'd say that was a positive for me, seeing that, oh, okay, I don't have to like put myself on this level of I can't be as close to God because I didn't grow up, with these certain things. That it's really your relationship with God, and he wants to be close to everyone. He doesn't have a select group of people like, oh, this church, I want to really be close to this church, or these people who are from this country, they're my chosen ones. God wants to be as close to every group of people as possible. The Bible talks about if you draw near to God, he's going to draw near to you. And I just love that truth. And I could tell that as I got older, and even now in who I am today, the closer I get to God, the closer he is to me. And he's always waiting there with welcome arms, even if I'm struggling or kind of taking for granted things he does in my life. God never changes his position, and he never changes his love for me.
So, Michael, you talked about how, you started doing your devotions more, having a relationship. Do you think that when you started to have a relationship with Christ, more than just like going about doing it just because you have to, going through the motions, do you think that people noticed the difference in you? Or do you think, it was a minor notice, like no one really noticed?
Oh, definitely people notice the difference. And like I said, earlier, I think people more notice the results of my change rather than what the source of it was. And that's like I said with regrets, that's something I really regret in high school, is not telling more people about just the impact that God had in my life. I remember my senior year, we had a band trip, and I was talking with some of the kids. I was giving them a ride home after our band trip, and there's a lot of the younger kids in band who kind of looked up to me, and I had built a relationship just because I was a upperclassman. You kind of teach them things, and they were talking to me just about some of the fears they had and stuff. And I remember I gave some answers, and it was like I talked about God, but I wasn't really sharing my whole story. And kind of what I say now about talking about Jesus is you should share the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, which the point in that saying is you shouldn't try to sugarcoat it. And I remember just saying like, oh, well, I know that I'm I'm not scared to go to college, and I'm not scared for my future because I know where I'm going. Like, I know whose hands I'm in. But I could have gone further and saying like sharing more of my story and my personal experiences, and saying like, guys, yeah, I struggle with fear too, and I've been in the same boat as you. But sometimes my pride gets in the way, and I want to make it seem like, oh no, I'm more high above you guys. I'm a senior now, and I'm going off to college, and I'm not scared. And that's something I regret, is just not being more real with people and just really sharing how much Jesus meant to me, who he is to me. And that's something I still struggle with today, because that shy little boy is still in me, that non-confrontational, introverted kid. That's still who I am. I mean, we lead youth activities now for church, and feel like it's taken me a good 2 years before I've even got to the point where I'm not nervous getting up in front of a group of teenagers. I mean, these crazy kids who don't even care what you say half the time. And it's taken me that long just to get to the point where I'm not kind of shaking in my boots talking to them. But, that's just a result of God working in my life. And like you said, I've kind of bounced around your question. People did see a change. And I think some people definitely noticed that God was the source of that. But definitely from talking with some of my teachers, just some people in church, whether it be parents of some of my friends, people who were around the same age as me growing up, they could definitely see that there's something not of myself happening in my life. And the great thing about that is when people notice that, it gives you an opportunity to share the goodness of God, the greatness of God, and just the amazing work that he's done.
Now, this is kind of a weird question to ask, but I want to ask it because I have something I want to say from it. Michael, did you attend college for like to be a missionary or to have some sort of biblical training at a collegiate level?
Well, for those who know, I went to Northeast Community College in Norfolk. If I answered that question, yes, I think that'd be pretty funny because I don't think they offer that there. Where I went to college, it was a community college. It's 20 miles from where I live. Or I shouldn't say 20 miles, 20 minutes from where I live. My roommates were Mark and Lois Fleer. My parents, I did not have the normal college life, and most of that was my choice. I think I probably would have preferred living the way I did it, living at home and driving to college and kind of not getting the normal college experience. But no, I did not go for missions or any Bible classes or anything. And of course, that's something that is great for people to do. And for those of you who are able, who have the funds, you feel like God's calling you to a Bible college, definitely, if God opens up that door, I'd say do it. because you're going to learn so much that's just going to help you. Like I said earlier, that's not going to make you have a good relationship with God, but there's going to be a lot of foundational things there to help you. And there's hopefully going to be professors, friends, an environment there to help cultivate you into the person that God wants you to be. But for me, that's God wasn't leading me to a Bible college. I went to Northeast, and I felt like I was to be staying in this area, just helping on our farm with my dad. It's just my sister and I for kids, and we have a family farm and cows and land and stuff, and serving in our church. And that doesn't a lot of times seem like for what when I say that serving in just your local church or even your own community sometimes feels like that's not much. We live in a world and a culture today that tries to shove down our throats that we need to break out of our small little shell and like do something huge in the world and get noticed. And really, I think that's discounting the fact of making an impact in where God plants you. And for me, that was right where I grew up, which is kind of special. I mean, looking back at it now, I'm really glad that it's all worked out this way. I married someone who lived pretty close to me, 7 miles away is where Regina, the host of this show, grew up, and went to the same church I did. And yeah, so God, he calls some people to go. Some people he calls you to stay, and you might not understand everything about that. But if God calls you to do something, he has a plan for it to work. But I do have some people tell me, and I think that's what, Regina, you were hitting on with this question, a little surprised of, I shouldn't say how much, but just my desire to kind of even just start a podcast like this or work with our youth group at our church. And some people look at me from the outside as like the anomaly, and that really shouldn't be so. I think if you look at the Bible and you look at God's desire for Christians, we should see more of that. We should see people who don't have Bible college degrees, people who maybe don't have what the world would, or even the Christian world would say qualifies you to be in the mission field of even just your own community. We should look at the whole world as our mission field. We should look at our lives as being in ministry. We don't all have the calling to be in full-time ministry, but we all should have a life that is involved in ministry, whether it's something in a church, something with your family, something in your workplace. We should have a desire, a passion, and then to put that into action of living for God.
You stole my thunder. Yeah, that's really what I wanted to hear from you, because I look at your story, Michael. I look at you and what, the Christian world thinks of that. Oh, he went to a public school. He went to, he didn't have any Bible training in college or anything like that. He doesn't have the lifelong goal to travel the country to save souls in different countries, to be a missionary. But each one of us should be a missionary to the people around us, to be that living testimony of who you are. And that's what I love about Michael so much, is that his testimony is true, and it is, people can see it. People know what he stands for and who he is just by how he talks, and how he can always originate a conversation from maybe something that's not even related to Christ, but bring it back into Christ. And I just think that's a huge thing, that people think that it's only the pastor's job. I don't have to tell people about Christ and salvation and different stuff like that. I don't need to do that. That's the pastor's job. I don't have the proper training. But all I can say is, Michael didn't tell me to say this, by the way, but if Michael Fleer from Hoskins, Nebraska can start a podcast with no training, can lead a youth program, what can you do? Where you're at right now, what can you do to broaden the gospel around you? And just hearing Michael's story and all the details in it, it should put a fire under you to tell souls all around you, people walking across the street. You see so many people on a daily basis that don't know. And it doesn't mean you have to run up to them and, be like, you sinner, you need the Lord. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just, do you see the souls around you that need Christ?
Well, thank you. And what I've told a few people this, and I think they're more joking, but I think they think that I'm joking when I say this. But if you've seen the Lego movie, there's a part where the main character, I can't remember what his name is, but they're looking inside his head, and they're like, "There's nothing here. Have you ever had one original idea or thought?" And he's like, "No, I just do whatever people tell me to." And I kind of relate that to me with. I know we all have spiritual gifts. We have things that God gives to us, but I don't really have any special, as Regina said, special training. I don't have any, in my opinion, great special gifts or abilities. It's kind of just when I feel God leads me to do something, I try to say yes. And a lot of times I don't feel like that guy in the Lego movie. There's nothing in there. And I think God looks at that as an opportunity to, okay, I'll give you something to do.
So, Michael, we've looked through your childhood. We looked through high school. We've looked through kind of the beginning stages of you becoming a man and different stuff like that, graduating college. Was there anybody along your journey of life in the short time that you've been here on earth that really impacted you or really just helped you along the way to bring you where you are today?
Yeah, there's a lot of people, and this is something I'm trying to do more as I get older, is to just think back and reflect on the people who God has brought into my life to help me on my journey. And I've just gotten someone emailed me the other day for my podcast wanting me to be part of this new app where people can follow you and ask you questions. And I'm really excited about that. And one of the questions that someone asked me was, I forget it specifically, but something about how do you not lose your sense of amazement? And I talked a little bit in my answer for that about just seeing how God places people into your life. And when I just look back on my life, just seeing how God works all of that together for so much good. And I'm thinking specifically for this podcast, and I did message her before I started all this, probably need to write her a big thank you letter or something, as my English teacher, Mrs. Gage. She just, when I think about, at the time, I didn't realize really the impact she had on me. And I didn't really even realize to the extent till I started this of how much she taught me just to share my voice and that I could share who I was in this world. And the assignments she would give and the way she would grade, looking back at it now, she was just trying to make us kids in her class into the best communicators, writers possible. She taught me how to write. I mean, most teachers, I'll tell people this, would be like, okay, you're going to have this spacing, you're going to have this amount of pages. And I really, I guess, commend or give credit to Mrs. Gage for teaching me how to write, teaching me how to take things that are in my heart, in my mind, and share them with people. And with this podcast, there's a lot of writing involved. There's a lot of prepping, research, and I learned a great deal of that from her class. So I just want to shout her out, I guess, and say thank you, because without her, she's one person for sure, besides God, obviously, that I have to say I would not be doing this without her really training that might be a bad word, but really her care and the love and passion that she put into teaching us students, and just the things that I learned in her class. And another one from high school is my football coach, Mr. Bramer. He was also our principal, but just the way that he carried himself and would love and care about each one of his players on his team. And something big that I got from him was, if you can be coachable, I can use you. And man, if that isn't true in life, and just realizing with people in your life, if they want to teach you something, if they want to coach you up, whether it's sports or just in life, they want to help make you into a better person, you need to humble yourself and just try to do what they're telling you to, because you know they love you. And I was a horrible football player. I mean, I was not good, but he was honest with me always, and he would teach me what I needed to do. He spent time in trying to make me into the best, not only football player, but best young man, best leader I could be. And I'm very thankful for the impact that he's had on my life. And I know the impact he's had with so many other young men who have gone through the school and football program there. And just, like I said, being a man and knowing how to treat other people, knowing how to treat your teammates, how to get along and work with people, even if they're not your best friend, if you don't really like them, that you can still get over that fact, fight through adversity. Just so many great things I learned from Coach Bramer. My parents, I've kind of talked about them a little bit, but very thankful for all the love and help both of them have given me, the encouragement. My sister, she's always encouraging to me. She's sometimes she can be really funny with her encouragement and just her relationship, but I know that she's always so caring, and that means a lot to me. And my wife, Regina, obviously, I can't say enough about her, but she's always there when I need her. And I just, I really can't put into words what she's meant to me in my life. And with doing this show, Pastor Miller, he's helped me a lot, our current pastor at our church. And one thing I'd say really about him is his challenge to me, if I'm doing something, to do it with a purpose. And that's so big, just don't do something to go through the motions, or that people know you're doing it and, oh, that's very nice. But if you're doing something, you might as well be trying to make an impact on that. And man, there's so many people who have helped me along my way, and two names that really stick out. And I know I'm going to be missing a lot of people with this, but Mike Maynor and Mike Pelletier. Mike Maynor, I've only met for about 1 week. He was on this show. He's actually the first interview on this podcast. And then Mike Pelletier, not a lot of people know who he is, but he's an evangelist. And the thing that sticks out to me about those two guys is their humility and their love for just any person. I mean, the way they carry their life and the way they live their life is just so genuine, and they care about everyone they meet. And if they can just impact one person, if one person's life can be changed through just the way they live their life, their influence, that's their goal. And I don't take that lightly, seeing that from their ministry. I mean, I don't know how old they are. I think they're both over 60 at least, but even at this age where it'd be understandable to maybe mail it in, you kind of take things easy, but to just see how they both conduct themselves. I mean, I've messaged them throughout this year, and it's always the same. They're wanting to be interested in what I'm doing. I remember when Mike Pelletier was here doing evangelistic meetings at our church. After the service, usually the special speaker, they just want to go talk to the pastor, talk about ministry things. And he came up to me and was just like, "Hey, can I take you out for dinner?" I'm like, "Sure." And then he, through the course of driving, asked me, or it came up that I was dating Regina at the time. So then when we sat down, he's just tell me all about Regina. Like, it was just like he cared about me, and that's what I'm striving to do with my life, is to care about each person as an individual and just know that if I can make an impact in even just one person's life, how powerful that is. Because if you're listening to this, your life is so important. God has such a great plan for you. He made you for a reason. You're not just a blip on the map. And yeah, so I would say those people, that's really, and like I said, I know I'm leaving a lot of people out, but they've really helped me in my life and also with this podcast.
So, Michael, is there anything else that you would like to share?
Yeah, the course of leading up to recording this podcast, God really laid this thought and idea on my mind that I should share, and I thought it'd be good for closing. I know a lot of people in today's world, especially, I'm sure it's been like this all throughout the history of time, but there's lots of people who just feel like they're not important, or they are, that the world might even be better off without them. And, I mean, I'm sure not to the extent of a lot of people, but I've felt that before too. And just this idea of falling short. And a lot of times we like to make excuses in our life that we don't fall short, and that we just need to be perfect. But, the Bible talks about we've all sinned, we've all come short of the glory of God. But, the Bible doesn't say that we have to be perfect in order to fulfill God's will for our life. And it's just part of life here on earth, is that we're going to come up short. I fall short of being the best husband, the best son, the best brother that I can be. I fall short of being a good man. I fall short in so many areas of my life, and it can be easy in this life to just dwell in those shortcomings and to get depressed and to just think that you can't do anything good. And to those listening who might struggle with this to any extent, I would just say that God loves you. If you're saved, God saved you, yes, for heaven, but he also saved you to have victory in this life, and he wants to be your deliverer, your overcomer. Just read through the Psalms. I mean, read through portions of the Bible where you can see how God tells you how he wants to deliver you, be your strong fortress, your rock. And I can say for me personally, like I said, there's just times where you feel like you're just a loser and that you bring nothing good to this world and you're failing, you're shortcoming. I know that's true for my feelings a lot of times, but when you can just remember who God is, who you are, and how he sees you. If you have given your life to Jesus, he sees Jesus' sacrifice. He doesn't see your sin anymore. And he wants to use you. He wants you to live in his will that he has for your life. Even though you're never going to be perfect, you're never going to be everything that people tell you that you should be. I mean, people can be rough in this world. They like to point out your shortcomings. They like to point out how you fail. Even just when you think about sports now, how everything's just championship or bust, that if you're not winning at all, that your season didn't even matter. And we can get so trained that way that if I'm not perfect, then I'm a failure. And yes, we all fail. We all fall short. But the point I'm trying to make is don't dwell in that. God loves you. God has a purpose for your life. He wants you to take hold of the greatness that's found in knowing him, in the relationship with him. And if you are listening to this, whether you know me or not, and you have any questions about that, maybe you're even, I've had a few people I've talked to over recent months about that even considering suicide, and just even saying that I'll listen to them. I mean, if anyone's ever like that, where you just really feel down in the dumps, like a failure, that you don't know who to talk to, you can reach out to me at my podcast. If nothing else, I can just listen, because I really, from doing this and kind of hearing some of the people out there in the world, have a greater understanding for that sort of need. And it's just a burden, I guess, on my heart to know that there's so much of that in the world today. But I guess I'm just saying that God's there for you. Also, if you just want someone to listen, I'm here for you. If you want to reach out on social media, email. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of a weird way to end my story, but that is how I will close out the episode.
Michael, thank you so much for sharing your story. Your story is unique, and each person has a unique story that is to them. So thank you so much for sharing. So until next time, toodles and happy trails. Also, adios.